Good morning, everyone. My name is Diane Perez, and on the behalf of the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association, welcome to today's webinar entitled Using Telehealth for Treatment of Substance Use Disorders. This webinar is being made available through a collaboration of the Florida Department of Children and Families Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health and the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association. Please note that as an attendee, you are in listen-only mode and will only be able to view your name. If you have questions, please send them to the presenter and me, the host, by using the Q&A panel. The button to open the panel is usually located on the upper right side of your monitor. Please use the Q&A panel to send any questions you may have as you think of them. The presenter will address questions as time permits. Our audio is broadcast through the internet to your computer. If you experience poor computer audio, there are a few options to try on screen right now, and these options have been posted in the chat panel. If you continue to experience poor audio through your computer, try rejoining the webinar and call in using the telephone I will call in option. You must be connected to the audio of this presentation and to be able to view it on the screen as well to receive a certificate of attendance. You must be able to view the presentation. The recording and materials used in today's presentation will be available on the FADA website within 10 business days. To access the recording, go to www.fada.org. Also, a PDF version of this PowerPoint presentation will be emailed to participants within that same time frame. FADA produces many webinars and workshops through the support of the Florida Department of Children and Families. To help participants track credits earned through attendance, we host an online community that provides a personalized digital journal where participants can maintain a statement of credit for webinars and workshops taken through the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association. At the end of today's webinar, the web browser will direct everyone to an evaluation form on the FADA website. You will first need to register or sign in to your account to complete the evaluation. Information you provide FADA as part of the registering remains confidential. Statements of credit will be posted within 10 business days after the evaluation closes. So this is after June 6th, we will be closing the evaluation. And it will be posted in the individual professional development journals for persons completing the evaluation and attending the full webinar. Completing the evaluation is necessary to receive CE credits or to access your statement of credit. Do note that the evaluation will close at midnight on Thursday, June 6th. 1 to 2 continuing education credits are available for participating in today's webinar for persons licensed through the Board of Nursing, the Board of Clinical Social Work, Marriage and Family Therapy, and Mental Health Counseling, and for persons credentialed through the Florida Certification Board. If you are a licensed healthcare practitioner, be sure to include your Florida license numbers for reporting to CE Broker when you register with our site for the first time. If you are certified through the Florida Certification Board or licensed outside the state of Florida, you don't need to provide your certification number when you register with our site. Note, please, that WebEx monitors arrival and departure of attendees and provides a report upon completion of the event. We are not permitted to provide contact hours or a certificate of attendance. If you do not attend the entire webinar, we are not permitted to provide partial credit. And now I would like to introduce our presenter, Sandnes Boulanger. Unfortunately, Dr. Diane Clark is not able to join us today. Sandnes earned a Master's of Social Work degree from the University of South Florida in 1999 and earned a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology with a Child Development Family Relations minor from Western Carolina University in 1993. Sandnes has over 20 years experience working in residential and outpatient settings specializing in trauma, addictions, ADHD, anger management, behavioral issues, divorce, family conflict, emotional disturbances, grief, parenting, and self-esteem. Cognitive behavioral, insight-oriented, and expressive therapies are utilized to develop a working therapeutic relationship with children, teens, and families. Sandnes serves as an Operation PARS Vice President of Clinical Services, providing clinical oversight to adults and adolescent outpatient services, Village Women's Pregnant and Postpartum Residential, LC Men's Residential, and Access Center Care Coordination. She provides clinical supervision for mental health and social work students, counselors earning hours towards state licensure or addiction certification, as well as facilitating online behavioral telehealth training. And now I would like to turn this over to Sandnes. Well, the presentation over to you. Hello, Sandnes? Sandnes?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. Technology, right? Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here. I'm glad everybody who is joining is with us here today, and we're going to talk about telehealth. My organization has been doing telehealth for quite some time, and we really like to do training, share what we know, and get more people involved in the use of telehealth. So today, the learning objectives we have is to understand the role of behavioral telehealth in the continuum of clinical services, understand the legal and jurisdictional implications for individual practice, understand ethics in providing behavioral telehealth. So this is a video. It's looking at how we work with telehealth in our residential program. Now, one of the things that I would like everybody to do as we go through this webinar is really to think creatively, think out of the box. We always talk about the use of telehealth and technology to expand our services and to meet the needs of the persons we serve. And doing that in a creative way, thinking of other ways that your organization or you yourself as a private practitioner can provide telehealth to people that are in need. And Cynthia, do I play this? I'm sorry.
No, I'm pulling it up as we speak. One moment.
myself and one of our residential counselors. Hi, so I don't know if everybody heard the video. This was myself and one of our residential counselors who were discussing how we utilize telehealth technology in residential services. And we actually provide tablets to our women's residential clients, and they are able to use those tablets to practice the use of technology safely, to have visits. We preload a video conferencing application onto the tablet, and they are allowed to have video meetings with their children if they're placed elsewhere and with significant others. What happened when we introduced this into our residential facility is we increased our length of stay by about 23 to 25%, which is really great because we were having a lot of mothers leave because they weren't able to see their children or see them often enough or understand what was happening with them. With the use of technology, they can go to doctor's visits with the children, they can have visits with the school, they can have visits with the child themselves. We've had people read bedtime stories to their children, even do potty training over the app. So a lot of creative ways that we have used it in technology. The way that it has worked is we have loaned it to people, and then they have the option at the end of their treatment to buy the tablet at a very discounted rate. So that's a real new way of looking at technology, a new way of looking at residential in particular, because a lot of people, when they come into residential, aren't allowed to have cell phones or access to the internet or things like that. There are certain risks involved in that, obviously, but our organization has taken on that risk and looked at the betterment of providing teachable moments, helping people learn how to use technology. Also, they practice the video conferencing so that when they go to outpatient, not a lot of them live very close to our facility, when they leave here, and that way they can remain with our facility if they choose to do so in our outpatient services, and they can be served through video conferencing telehealth. So we get this all the time. Why is it different, and what's the big deal? Just get a video conferencing platform, get some video, and start interacting with people, providing therapy. Well, there are some nuances that are different person to person and face to face than there is over the computer, and we'll certainly go over those. Some of the things, barriers can be overcome with telehealth. Certainly transportation. Here in Florida, we're a big state. We're spread out, even in the very metropolitan areas. Sometimes transportation is an issue, especially if you have children. Certainly, we all know here in Florida during this time of year, it rains a lot, and getting somewhere, having to transfer buses. I know there's places here in our area that it may take 20 minutes in a car, but if you're having to take the bus and with the transfers, it could take over an hour. And sometimes it's very inconvenient for people and difficult. It's what leads to no-shows. And certainly telehealth could be a way of doing that. Looking to reduce the no-show rate and increase counselor productivity. One of the things we did is we had people that were providing services through telehealth, counselors, and we still had clients that were no-showing, that had things come up and they weren't able to come to their session, and they would cancel or they would just not show. So we created what we called Open Fridays, and on Fridays we had time allotted for those counselors. The people that missed their appointment Monday through Thursday could then, again, schedule on Friday. And that way, we were having it became very popular that people were able to use it. People were using it instead of missing or just not showing. And so we were giving them that extra opportunity to participate in services and engage clientele familiar with technology. And we'll look at that further. So many people, we have a lot of cyber natives out there now who are so used to engaging and using technology that this is certainly very comfortable for them. So what is telehealth? Well, it's a service delivery, and the type of services that can be used through telehealth are used through telehealth, certainly supervision and fidelity monitoring. The majority of the video conferencing platforms have the ability to record, and you could use that record option, certainly with signed releases from the clients or person served, and really help people move along with their ability within telehealth. So we use it for supervision. We also use it for fidelity monitoring. Whether you're doing group or individual sessions, You can use it, as I've already said, for visitation. Our adolescent residential facility has adolescents from all over the state. So the visitation through video conferencing is really helpful, also providing family therapy while the adolescent is in residential is really helpful. So visitation, staffing, we're located across the west coast of Florida, and some of our sites are 2 hours away. So when we're looking to have trainings or even perhaps staffing that people aren't able to travel, we are able to do that through the video conferencing. And again, creative ways of using the technology to increase your services and to better your services. And certainly communication is a big part of that. So when we teach this live, one of the things we do is we ask people to Google what telehealth, video conferencing, distance conferencing, telehealth, find all the names they can find. And if you go out there, you'll find everything from cyber counseling, telehealth, telebehavioral health, telepsychiatry, telemedicine, video counseling. It'll go on and on and on and on. And so there isn't one word or one definition of the word that's used. SAMHSA has a definition, and from now on, we tend to say behavioral telehealth, but just so you know, there's a million titles out there, and there's no one title that is used for these services. But what SAMHSA defines the use of technology is use of electronic media and information technologies to provide services used by skilled and knowledge professionals, and I cannot emphasize this enough, that you absolutely have to go through trainings, you have to practice, you do need supervision. And right now, the Florida Certification Board does not have their certified e-therapist credential active, but they are working on updating that so that it will be active and will be more to today's standards of telehealth, where when it was created at a time where telehealth was just at its beginning stages. So we're really looking for people to be trained and knowledgeable, and that's ongoing training. Services, screening, assessment, primary treatment, and aftercare, more accessible modes. Help people access treatment services. And it can be a sole treatment or in combination with other treatments. So that's very important, and we'll talk about that a little further on too. So why are standards important? Why does it matter? Well, we certainly need to make sure that the people who are providing the services are competent. We need to make sure that we are protecting people and their confidentiality. Certainly social responsibility, cultural competency is part of that. And above all and always is safety and security of the people that we serve. So when you start assessing appropriateness, we started off with a federal SAMHSA grant, and we started serving everyone that was on that grant was going to be served through telehealth. Well, what we quickly realized is that you really do need to assess for appropriateness with the clients, right? Because not every client with internet access should be a behavioral telehealth client. And again, conversely, not every clinician is a good candidate for behavioral telehealth either. There's some different skills involved. But we'll first start talking about the clients. Let's see. So assessing appropriateness of the client. You really need to talk to them about their feelings about behavioral telehealth, how comfortable they are on a computer. Do they have access to a computer? And again, with this, you have to consider what your program is doing. Are you providing services site to site, meaning that you're at a facility and the person receiving services is in a facility, or is it site to home? Are you providing the services from a site and the client is in their home? So that's very important to figure that out. Looking at their internet access, their motivation to participate in this type of treatment. And again, and once again, we'll say it many, many times, the safety of themselves. Are they safe? And are they going to be safe with others around? So if you look, when we're talking about, again, I brought up cyber natives, people that have only known the use of technology and the internet within their lifespan. And if you look here, this is looking at this is a Pew Research data. If you're looking at offline population, has declined substantially since 2000. So if you look at 2000, 48% were not really going online, that they were staying offline. And now we're at 2019 and we're at 10%. So certainly people are becoming, they're becoming more comfortable utilizing technology, or they're being forced to use technology because our world is certainly going in that direction. And then you look at, for adults, the most common or widely used platforms YouTube, 73%, Facebook, 69%. Then you see down below, a lot of those are really popular with the kids. Well, Instagram, Snapchat, WhatsApp, those kind of things are popular with the younger population. But this one was looking at what's really popular with adults. So just one thing I would like to emphasize is when you're working with clients online, and we have talked about this, we have actually added to our screening what people's on-life life is like. What do they use? How much time do they spend with using technology? What are they doing when they're on technology? And this is very, very important. We'll get into a little bit more now later. But if you don't understand how much life, there are online worlds out there. There are also, gaming. And while the World Health Organization has identified gaming disorder, and there is an ICD-10 code for gaming disorder, there's not an actual diagnosis. But certainly that's stuff that's on people's radar, and we're looking at how much time people are spending. Is that interrupting their first life? Is that causing issues with their work, with their relationships, with et cetera, et cetera? So certainly it is something to look at and consider of what type of technology and how much people are using that you're treating. So when we're talking about the client, limited ability for in-person contact, there's lots of groups that this really applies and could be helpful for. The elderly. Now, sometimes I worked with a colleague that they were working with the elderly population actually in an assisted living facility, and they wanted to provide telehealth, and it was handled in a way that was very inappropriate. They would wheel the clients into a room that had a computer monitor, and then the therapist from a completely different site was supposed to work with the client. It wasn't really well explained. It wasn't asked if people wanted to have services this way. And so it really was not successful or didn't work well. So you certainly have to have that conversation. And sometimes the elderly aren't comfortable on computers. Sometimes maybe they need some time to work with it. But it certainly is. We had one of our employees here recently retired, and she was 81. And I'll tell you what, she would kill me on a computer. She was fantastic. So don't, assume that every elderly person is not going to want to be on the computer, because that's not the case either. But persons with limited physical mobility, people with transportation problems, certainly rural communities, it's very important because, like I said, we're in a big, big state, and there can be sometimes many miles between where services are located. And certainly rural communities could utilize telehealth. And consumers that have work schedules that conflict with on-site. We have a lot of people that work, 6 in the morning to 8 at night, or 8 in the morning to 8 at night, and they really can't get in to the time that we offer services all the time. We have extended, some of our programs have extended their hours, even to 9 o'clock through the video conferencing, and that's helped out with some people's schedules. Again, those with caretaker roles who really don't have the ability to leave their house or leave their location because they're watching over somebody. Certainly incarcerated persons, we did used to have a program that worked with dads who are in the prison system and were going to be released, and having video conferencing meetings with their family on the outside and having connection with them that way, and having some therapy for when they were going to be released and returned with their family was a really important program. Certainly probation and parolees from criminal justice programs who movements are legally restrictive, active duty military personnel, would-be consumers concerned about the stigma, people that don't want to come into treatment, that they have really avoid reaching out or coming into treatment because they're worried about the stigma and they're worried about being recognized. Certainly in smaller communities, oftentimes people don't want to come into the facility to receive treatment because it's a small community. Your car will be recognized. People will see you turning in there, and a lot of people don't want to have that stigma. So we've talked about what things that could be helpful for clients, people that would be good candidates perhaps for behavioral telehealth. Now, when is it not okay to see someone? When would you be concerned about seeing someone over telehealth? And it seems obvious. Actively suicidal or homicidal individuals, really not good, psychotic. They're not stabilized. Their medication isn't stabilized yet. Or they're really inconsistently attending and you're worried about their safety. People that are perhaps in active withdrawal, people that are at risk for relapse, starting to behave in high-risk behaviors. Those are all individuals that it most likely is not the best idea to see over telehealth. Many of the providers that I have spoken with, as well as us here, we have the client come in face-to-face for an initial session. Not only are you getting all the paperwork signed, there are ways of doing that with technology, but you can do it face-to-face. Make sure that who you are talking to is who's going to be attending your sessions. You can even practice telehealth if that's the direction you're going to go. In the office, we have extra tablets. You can even use a smartphone from like the counselor's computer to the client's smartphone and practice what a video conferencing session would be like so that they understand it and they're comfortable with it. But it's very important also to discuss with clients from the get-go that we may start and I will be serving you through telehealth, and it may come a time that either you don't feel comfortable anymore with the telehealth or don't feel like it's helping you and you would prefer face-to-face, or myself as the counselor will say to you, I don't think this is a good way of serving you at this point, and we really need to go back to face-to-face. So certainly just having that upfront conversation that at any time either party could recommend that they go from behavioral telehealth to face-to-face. So going back to the clinician, and what is really needed with the clinician to provide telehealth? Well, in our experience, you certainly need a foundation of clinical skills, and whatever that may mean. That may mean some time in the field. That may mean that people have a lot of practice. That may mean that you have to look at the counselor and really, our therapist, and really determine that they have good, solid clinical skills and experience, are open to supervision and are willing to hear feedback. Because what happens with telehealth is you're called to use skills that you don't use in face-to-face. It's a different environment, and that's why I consistently say it's practice, 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 because it is different. It's different that you log on to the video conferencing session and there's a picture of you sitting right there. You're watching yourself talk. You're watching your facial movements while paying attention to your client, hopefully. It is distracting to see yourself on there. When you're looking at your client, unless you are looking directly into the camera, which means then you are not looking at your screen, you're not looking eye to eye with your client. So there's a lot of variations and things you have to get used to. You also have to get used to and fairly comfortable with technology, because you are going to have to walk people through problem solving. Just like we see today, there was people that they couldn't hear things, they couldn't see certain things on the screen, things like that. You as a clinician, if you're operating and providing telehealth services, you're going to have to walk the person through problem solving and figuring out, did you turn this button on? Have you tried to log out and log back in? Did you do the right click on the right button? So there's a lot of that goes on, and sometimes people get very nervous and distracted when there's technological issues and they're not able to get into that space of being therapeutic and being a therapist. So there are different skills that you will be called on to use, and everybody really needs to have training on that. So the structure of treatments, it resembles face-to-face. The only difference, and I had a conversation with somebody about this last week, typically if you see someone in the office, you may walk up to the front, greet them, walk back to your office. You have the time for that little small talk, like how's the weather, oh, you have a nice shirt on, whatever it is. You have this little small talk time in that walk. You don't have that necessarily when you log on to the computer. What you have is testing to make sure the system is working. So it's a little different that way. It's a little different entrance. It's a little different work within. So it resembles face-to-face, but then you have to keep in mind the confidentiality issues, rights and responsibilities, person's commitment to treatment, and boundaries, including one of the things, and we'll get into informed consent a little down the road, but with informed consent, you really need to have on there, or included also, is a social media policy, including that you're not going to friend your clients on Facebook. You will not respond to people after your hours. You will not text them, because that's not secure unless you have a secure texting way. But, you have to have all these things outlined and discussed, because people, again, many people, those cyber natives out there, are so comfortable with technology that they will reach out to you utilizing technology. There are some video conferencing platforms that you can have quick chats that people can see if you're live on the video conferencing, and they can send you a chat, which can be in the middle of another session or things happening. Not all video conferencing platforms have that, but some do. So you have to be aware of that, and you have to have the discussion with your client of how and when they're going to contact you with the use of technology. Just as you do with face-to-face when you have the discussion, if I run into you in the community, I'm not going to acknowledge you. If you acknowledge me, that's okay. I'll say hi. We'll kind of move on. You know, having those discussions, you have to help people understand their boundaries and help people understand how that's protecting their confidentiality and safety. So as far as treatment services, again, one of the things to keep in mind, the structure. Are you providing services site to site or site to home or another location? Are you providing this are you using telehealth to provide for groups, to do group therapy, or are you doing individual sessions only? And those are some things really to keep in mind, especially with the group. Is it a group that is all together in one room and you're at another site providing the services? Or is it a group where people are all logging in from different areas and you are at a site? And with those are all conditions where we'll get into our safety checklist a little later on, but those are all conditions that you really need to have a good safety plan surrounding, understanding what kind of services you're providing, and certainly understanding the person that you're serving is located. Again, how long are the sessions going to be? How will you connect? Sometimes there are ways that with individual clients with video conferencing systems, you can send an email to them that will give them the link to log on to. You can have an automatic meeting number that they know every time they meet with you. This is the meeting number that they use when they log in. There's a lot of different ways to connect. So you have to make sure that you've had that discussion and practice with people. What happens if we lose connectivity? How are we going to contact each other? Having that as a plan. Are we going to move to phone? Are we going to try one more time to connect through video? Are we going to switch to maybe having the need to have a face-to-face session? How are we going to do that? Having that plan ahead of time. And, you're missing out, and we'll get into this a little bit further, on some of the body language that goes on when you have somebody in front of you. So one of the things that is very important, and what it feels like, oftentimes when I talk to a lot of people that provide services through telehealth, and one of the things that you hear, a theme that comes up, is that people tend to feel very exhausted after a telehealth session. And I used to feel that way. I know with family sessions, I used to feel like I was run over by a Mack truck sometimes. And that's sometimes the way people describe the behavioral telehealth. It's much more intense because you're having to pay attention. My belief is you're having to pay attention to many different things than you do face-to-face. You also are having to use greater verbalizations because the person's not in front of you. If you're going to share a screen with them, share some information where you can show it to them on screen, you have to explain that because it's not like they're in front of you. So you have to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This may take a minute. Let me click here. Doing those kind of things so they know what's going on, where you would not have to do that level of explaining if they were sitting in front of you and you were pulling out a sheet from your file cabinet. So it's different in that way. So you have to remember you do have to explain these things. There's also a lot of, can you hear me? I know I used to have a gentleman that I worked with on telehealth, and when we logged in every single session, it would take about 10 or 15 minutes of, can you hear me? Can you see me? And he would use the headset, the headphone, and he would almost every time forget how he needed to log on to make sure that that headphone would work. So it is doing a little bit different things than you would with face-to-face for sure. So what do we know? We certainly know there are special challenges to providing services this way. We have to be aware and make sure that we are protecting confidentiality. You have to balance that technology skill, the understanding, the ability to problem solve with people, to walk through, to understand the technology with the clinical skill of how you work with people. And like I said, you have to use a different communication style. You certainly have to verbalize things in a different way. And so another special challenge that will come along is that people will have their cameras set up in a way that you can't see them. Either they'll have it cracks me up. We run meetings oftentimes through the use of video conferencing, and people will log on and you're looking at the top of their forehead, you're looking at their desk. You really do have to adjust that camera to make sure you have the best sight view of yourself, your face and your torso. You have to look at lighting. If there is a window behind you, if you have a bright light behind you, you're often going to appear very dark and people aren't going to be able to see your facial features on the video. Same goes with sound. We had a gentleman that they offer groups and they have the group all in one room. So they have a camera in there that kind of spans the whole room. And he was participating with us through that room, but the room was so large and the camera was across the whole room, plus that one of the cameras was up on the wall. So he's looking, with his neck back straight up. He's super tiny on the screen. And when he was speaking, it was echoing because he's in this large room that only had him in it. So you really do have to pay attention to what the room setup is like, what your lighting is like, what kind of camera you have, how you put that camera on your computer, where you put it, and where you look when you're speaking with people. I already mentioned, unless you're looking directly into the camera lens, you will not be looking at the people. So we explain that to people, that you can see it's looking off because I'm looking at my screen and I'm watching you. So those are some of the things that you do need to explain as well. So again, the nuts and bolts of a session. Make sure it fits the client. Preparation for the session. I always log on, we practice a lot with use of Zoom. I would suggest before you begin working with a client that if you have the ability to have them face-to-face a few times or at least one time, I would encourage that. And I would encourage you to practice with them in office. Put them in another office, you in your office, and then try to have a kind of mock session or have your session that way entirely so that they learn how to use the computer, so they see how it looks. And I will bring up that it is important, you do need to know that various video conferencing platforms will look different on different technologies. So on a desktop, it may look one way. So you may be guiding someone to go to the bottom and hover, and then you'll see where you can mute yourself. On a tablet or on a smartphone, it might be in a different location. So you really do need to know how the person is going to utilize technology. Are they going to use a tablet? Are they going to use a smartphone? Are they using a laptop? Are they using a desktop? Because that will change how you help them problem solve if something is to go wrong. So that we learned that the hard way. I was trying to guide a client. We only had clients really log on from computers, and then we had a gentleman with a tablet. And we were having trouble with his ability to unmute himself. And I'm trying to guide him in one way and recognizing that that's not where it's located on the tablet as we're going through the problem solving. So making sure you know what the platform looks like on various technology. So this is I think this is one of the most useful things that we created as we were beginning with telehealth. This is our safety checklist. And certainly people have added things on this, and I'll tell you where we've added some things as well. And we had this very specific to our video conferencing platform, but we took that out and made it more generic so that people can apply it across any program. Feel free to use it, add to it, or change any way that you would like. So we have it separated into 3 areas: before starting a session, during a session, and then ending a session. So before starting a session, let others in your office space know you're entering a behavioral telehealth session. Why do you do that? In case of an emergency. So what we would do, if you have the ability to do this, if you don't have other people in your office space, if you're in a private practice and you're the only one in the private practice, then you pretty much will come up with a different safety plan about letting others know. You certainly would have in case of emergency contact and things like that. So we let other people in our office know. And we tell them, I may need to contact you. We all have cell phones at our facility by phone, or I may text you, or I may open my door and tell you I have an emergency and I need help. Then you need to place a sign on your door that says, do not disturb in a behavioral telehealth session. Really important, because a lot of times when people see you on your computer, depending on how your office is, you may have a window in your office into the hallway or on your door, and people walking by just see you on your computer and assume you're just on your computer. They may not see anybody else in their office. They may knock on your door. They may try to go in your door. Before we did this, I had someone key into my office as I'm in the middle of a session because they didn't think that I was doing, they thought I was just doing work on the computer. So you certainly need to make sure you have that sign up. I would also encourage that on that sign, you have the time that you'll be in the Zoom, we use Zoom, so I keep saying Zoom, in the telehealth session, that you say, in a telehealth session, please do not disturb, and then put the time that you'll be in the telehealth session so they're aware. Silence your phone, turn off your email. And I say that if you're going to share your screen at any point during the session, and you have your email turned on, most of us have those instant pop-up reminders with the email. So if you had that on and you went and shared your screen and you're going over something with your client, then all of a sudden your email starts popping up on your screen. You're sharing information with them that maybe is, protected records. So you have to be very careful that you have that turned off. Silence your phone. Make sure you're able to see a clock, because depending on what video conferencing platform you use, sometimes if you only are operating off of one screen, when you open that screen into full view, it may block the clock. You may not see the clock. Making sure that you have a clock somewhere in your office where you can tell what time it is. Again, if you're going to share your screen from the and we are able to share our electronic health record and create, update treatment plans with people, which is really great. The thing about our electronic health record, though, is that we can have multiple clients open at one time. So it'll have a tab at the top of the page with each client's name. You absolutely have to make sure that you only have your client open if you're going to share. What I do is I always open it up. I open up the treatment plan. I make sure it's the only client open, and then I minimize. And then when I go to share the screen with my client, I'm assured that only their information is visible. Adjust your camera to a position that's appealing. Like I said, make sure you're looking straight on and it has a good torso view of you. Make sure the lighting is good. Test your microphone and sound. Now, when your clients log in, some of the video conferencing systems have a little bing that you can turn on that will happen, so you're aware that they log on. Again, go through the process of making sure they can hear you. You can hear them. Go ahead and do any kind of problem solving you need to around technology in that way. Then during the session, and this is really, really important and vital, and certainly you don't have to ask in this way, going through a checklist each time you meet with them, but each time you need to verify if they are not in a different site, if they are not at a site location that you're working with them, if they're in their home or some other place, you really need to say, where are you today? Let me verify the address and location. If we should get disconnected, what number can I reach you? If the technology freezes, if the technology, something happens with the Wi-Fi, how do I reach you and get a number? And then also at that number one, and we don't have it on here, but people have added, of course, you should, as part of normal practice, have an in case of emergency contact that you could contact if something was to go in the emergency direction. Also, to have, make sure, we've had a gentleman that was traveling, and he was traveling to the other coast. We're on the West Coast. He was traveling to the East Coast. We made sure, and we knew that ahead of time, he had told us, but this is where you could utilize somebody that you had notified that you may need to contact them if you need help. If you logged on and someone was saying, oh, I forgot to tell you, I'm visiting my cousin on the other coast, so I'm going to be here today. Certainly get that address and location. And then you need to have somebody else or yourself find out the emergency contact numbers in that area. It seems pretty common sense, but you can't dial 911 from where you are and get emergency services for somebody on the other coast. So you really need to make sure you have the emergency contact numbers for there and make sure that you have all that available to you before you start the session. Then going on to, if people are in their home, is there anyone else there with you? If no, then go ahead. If yes, well, who is there with you today? Do you want to continue the session with so-and-so there today? If no, then you end the session. Also, you as the clinician, this is, again, calling on skills that you don't typically have to use in person, face-to-face sessions. We had a little role play that people had done on this very area of safety, and they had played a woman that had her boyfriend there, and the boyfriend, there was a history of DV with the two, and, the lady was like, oh, I don't care, it's fine, we can discuss whatever in front of him. And so the counselor had to say, well, I would prefer that we had session without so-and-so there. And if we wanted to have so-and-so there, that would be something we would discuss ahead of time and blah, blah, blah. So really deciding if it's safe to continue with the session. And so if yes, that if there is a situation, I know I've had clients that had a sick teen home or had one of my colleagues had a woman whose daughter would visit frequently, adult daughter would visit frequently with her. And so what we said was, and that's okay if the people are okay with those people there in a different room or whatnot, but coming up with a word that means that we need to stop the conversation, or maybe we even need to end the session. And some of the words that people have come up with, safe words, are coffee. One of my colleagues uses coffee with her clients. So if something just come up, they would say, hey, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. And then she would know that that means to end the session or to stop talking. Someone else is in the area or can hear. Another one somebody came up with was going to get groceries. So coming up with some kind of word that represents that you need to stop. Even you as the counselor could say, hey, do you need a cup of coffee? If you heard something going on or something happening, and they could say yes, you say, okay, that's fine. So ending the session, if you're using a headset, certainly take it off and unplug headset. Remove your do not disturb sign from your door. Make sure you log out. Let other people in your office space know you're no longer in session. It's very important to do this. We had a situation, well, I personally had a situation where I had taken my headset, put it around my head, thought I had completely logged off, went to open my door, and before I got there, my assistant came in and started asking me, she's like, hey, we're ordering lunch out, what would you like? And I hear my client from around my neck on my headphones saying, I'm still here. So I said, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. So we disconnected, but if you walk in and started saying, hey, Sally Lou is here to see you, we would have given away information, confidential information. So you really have to be careful that you completely log off and shut down before you open your door, take down your signs, and let other people know that you're off. Very important. So again, be prepared. Practice ahead of time. Have your signs already made. I certainly have my signs in plastic covers so I can change the time. It says the same thing across, do not disturb, please do not knock, in a video session. And then I have it where I can erase with a dry erase marker and put the times on there. And certainly because the client signed the walls of an office, they're in their home perhaps, they feel very comfortable there. They may have more distractions themselves. They may feel more comfortable and more at ease of expressing their feelings. They could maybe increase negativity or anger. So you really do have to expect the unexpected. And I'll tell you some unexpected situations that we had. That gentleman that had traveled to the other coast visiting with some relatives with our clinician, and she knew ahead of time. She had the emergency contact numbers there. She had an emergency contact for him. She asked for the phone number at the house. She had all that in place. And the visit apparently was not going well. The client during the session was getting increasingly agitated, and at one point held his hand up to the camera, opened his hand, displayed a handful of pills, took the pills, and logged off the session. Our counselor, thank goodness, had followed the emergency checklist, like I was saying, to the T. She was able to get somebody in that house on the phone. She was also able to contact emergency services. The client actually ended up logging back onto the session. They were able to talk him through it, and it all turned out fine. The authorities were able to get there. They were able to take him, Baker Act him, and everything was fine. It all turned out fine. But it could have not. It could have turned out very wrong if we had not had those things in place. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be prepared and to have those in place. Another situation, we had a client. I was working with a client and his wife, and we were doing a couples session, and they kind of got into it. It got a little heated. They were, unfortunately, I learned a lesson here, they were using a tablet between the two of them, so obviously they had to sit pretty close to each other, right, which would not typically happen in your face-to-face sessions. It got heated. My client was holding the tablet, my identified client, and he threw it across the room and then stormed out of the room. And then all I hear is screaming and doors slamming, and I'm laying on the floor looking up at the ceiling in this tablet. So luckily, the wife was able to pick up the tablet. I was able to check back in with my client. It all worked out fine. But again, it's expect the unexpected and trying to have some of these plans. And so that's why we certainly share some of these stories with us. We had another one, a woman who was in a sober living facility I was working with, and we typically met where she would be in her bedroom. And today, on this particular day, she said, it's so nice outside. I think I'm going to go outside and sit at the gazebo. And I said, that's fine, as long as you're comfortable that there's not a lot of people around and you can have your privacy. And she said, absolutely. So as we're walking out there, I should have said, let's log off and we'll log back in when you're out there at the gazebo. But I didn't. So she's walking, talking to me. She has in the earbuds, and she's on her smartphone. And every time she passed someone, she held up her smartphone and showed them to me and said, oh, this is Susie. Susie, say hi to my therapist, Sandnes. And I was like, oh, my goodness. So we have to have a conversation. You cannot disclose other people's, that goes against anonymity. These people are at a sober living facility. You're giving away. And she's like, oh, they don't care, So you really have to help people understand how this is safety. Certainly, I would never have seen those people had I had not had that where she was showing me on the camera. So having that discussion of how you handle that ahead of time, that really telling your clients that you can't just bring people into session. You can't just show people on the camera. It really has to be planful because, you wouldn't run into that face-to-face. I wouldn't have had that situation if she had come into the office and seen me there, absolutely. So again, utilize description, feedback, and it's reflective listening, very important with this. Making sure you know ground rules. We have a guidelines little form that we have people sign that, indicates their time of sessions, that we will not, just as we do with face-to-face, we're not going to conduct a session if you log on to Telehealth influence. What the client's responsibility how do they request sessions? Like I was again saying, we had that open Friday. How are they able to access that if that's what we're offering? And about emails, that I'm not going to conduct sessions through emails. We can schedule. We have that system where we have text, email, and voice messaging for appointment reminders, certainly with the right release for all people to do that. But sometimes clients, and I'm sure you experience this in face-to-face too, will send you emails really, really long, like, I just wanted to talk real quick about blah, 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 and then they write a, dissertation about what's going on that day or that week and want to have you email them back. So you have to be very careful if that's not the way you're conducting your sessions, that you're doing it through video conferencing, that you have that discussion about how you will communicate with them. Again, starting to talk about discharge at admission from the very get-go, just as you would do in face-to-face. With that process. I think it's different and it feels different for people over the computer because they feel like you're more readily accessible. They can reach out to you at any moment, that they can see if you're available, shoot you a text, all these kind of things. That's a little different than face-to-face. So while this is certainly exactly what you do with face-to-face, it's also included in telehealth, and you have to explain some of those things to people in a little bit different nuance because certainly, like I said, cyber natives are so used to communicating and being connected with people through technology that they really sometimes don't understand the boundaries or the difference with therapy over the internet. Okay, Cynthia, I thought, is this the time that we would take a break?
Yes, it is. We'll go ahead and take a 5-minute break, and we'll come back at 10:59. See you all in a little bit. Hello. Sandnes, are you ready to resume?
Okay, so one of the most important things that your agency or you as a private provider will want to know is about reimbursement for telehealth. So the majority of insurances, traditional insurances, will reimburse, and there is parity involved, so they will reimburse at the same rate that they would for a face-to-face session. But I would say you absolutely need to contact that insurance company and see what kind of stipulations they have within behavioral telehealth. Sometimes there's different codes that need to be used. Sometimes there's clarification about the way you're providing telehealth. There's all sorts of things that you need to make sure are in place first. With Medicaid and Medicare, so there's this idea of originating site, which is where the client or person served is located, and the distant site where the provider is located. And traditional with Medicare and Medicaid was that the originating site and the distant site both had to be at a facility that had Medicaid or Medicare provider numbers. That is changing. Medicare, as of July 1, will reimburse for the originating site, meaning where the client or person served is at their home, where they previously would not. Medicaid with the various HMOs, I certainly would say you need to discuss with them. There are different codes. It appears that they're moving in that direction as well. If you're funded by Central Florida, have any funding like that, they have been very open to the use of telehealth, so certainly discussing that. There's also grants out there that involve technology and utilizing telehealth. Judicial issues. So I wanted to bring that up because, certainly at our facility we have many individuals that are involved in drug court, dependency court, Marchman, all these issues judicially, and making sure that within those entities, not so much perhaps funding issues. Sometimes there is jail diversion that has some funds that will pay for services and things like that. But you need to make sure that everybody is on the same page and up to date with telehealth and that they are approving of it. We've had certain judges in some of the drug courts in outside counties of where we reside that are absolutely not accepting of or believe in the use of telehealth. So you absolutely have to check those things out. Plus, it's a changing world. Telehealth is becoming more and more the norm. It's being used to really fill in these gaps and really to help, especially with the opioid crisis. And so you really do have to pay attention, ask the questions, and make sure that you'll be reimbursed and that telehealth is a way that will be accepted, for somebody's probation or for their legal requirements. So how does a platform secure the virtual environment? There's a lot of security measures that have to be into place. So with the video conferencing platforms, and you can go out there, there's several apps that will allow you to compare multiple video conferencing platforms, what's the cost of them, what services, bells and whistles they have, things like that. You need to make sure for agencies, there is a cost associated with the HIPAA-compliant video conferencing platform. You do have to pay for it. You also have to make sure that there is a business associates agreement for the HIPAA compliance associated with the video conferencing platform. The majority of them have them out there. You just have to make sure. I recently learned that many of the platforms are now offering free HIPAA compliance and BAAs for single providers, so somebody in private practice. But what they're offering in that free is the basic model. So it may not, I don't know exactly what the basic model would have or not have. It may not have chat. It may not have screen share. It may not, who knows what it doesn't have. But certainly if you're looking into that, make sure you ask those questions. I would absolutely suggest that you look at several, talk to other people, really consider what kind of services you're looking to provide and which platform best fits that. You really want to look at ease of use for the client, You don't want to have to spend 20 minutes of each session trying to explain to people how to get their mute off or how to send you a chat if they can't hear you or how to do things. That's not helpful at all. So the ease of use is very important. You want to look at what it looks like on different devices, like I said, tablet, smartphone. How does it work? Does anything differ or does it change if you're operating off of more than one screen on your desktop? These are some of the questions that you might want to ask. Who can record and how does a record happen? Typically with the video conferences sessions, you'll see a little red circle, as you can on this WebEx, that is being recorded. Make sure you know how that's done. Can you block people from recording? Asking all these questions, very important to do. Discussing with the client how their information is protected through this video conferencing platform. The system that we use, we print out from the system's website. They have a nice little sheet that explains how they're HIPAA compliant, that it's all encrypted, that nothing is saved. They explain all this in a very easy to understand way, and so we give that to all of our clients that are participating in telehealth. We also encourage them, you can go onto the site yourself. They have a chat function there that will pop up like, how can I help you? And you can ask the questions yourself if you're concerned. I provided services for a gentleman that was a contractor, so he would travel, but he was very knowledgeable of computer systems. In fact, that's what he was a contractor for. So he had a ton of questions. I gave him the sheet. He still had some questions. I sent him to the site, and then he came back and said, okay, I'm fine. I understand now how it all works, and I'm not concerned. So, again, I think it's one of those things that you have to protect to the best of your ability and to the best of what's out there currently. And you have to tell people that. And so you do need to provide that information to them and make sure that they understand, even if they're not that interested in it. I mean, I've had so many teenagers that we've served that are like, oh, I don't care. I'm on, I do FaceTime all the time. I do this, I do that. And they don't want to hear it really, but it is our duty to make sure we explain to them how their confidentiality and how their information is protected. It's extremely important. Also, those of us in the substance use field, 42 CFR Part 2, my supervisor always calls this HIPAA on steroids, like we're held to a higher standard than mental health providers, and we have to really make sure that that is protected and that people understand and that we're getting the right releases at the right time. And there's different ways you can do that. I'll go into a little bit here. If you have the people come in for that initial session or for initial few sessions, you can certainly have that paperwork signed at that time, or you can have online signatures. There's DocuSign, others that you're able to have people sign electronically, and you can have them sign that way too. So making sure you have the right releases in place, and I would always say be planful. Those last-minute things that people want to do that could potentially be dangerous, or you have that little feeling in your stomach like, I don't know if this is the best idea. I would always encourage people to be more planful, plan that for a next session or another session if at all possible. So certainly in the informed consent that you need to have, some organizations create an entirely new informed consent that includes that includes all behavioral telehealth information. Other agencies have chosen to just add that information to their current informed consent. Add that you may also be served through video conferencing. You need to identify the risks, the benefits, any alternatives, and you always need to allow opportunity for questions from your client regarding the use of technology. And we, like I said, we had that little guideline on top of our informed consent. We have a little guideline checklist. And again, we go over that we are able to, at any moment, they can back out of telehealth, or we can ask them to come to face-to-face, and they sign all that as well. So making sure you have real clear communication, informed consent. And again, I said to have a policy on social media as well. And if you Google social media policy for telehealth, they have many examples. There's one that it seems that everybody is using, and she gives you the right to use it as long as you list her as the original creator. And real helpful not to recreate the wheel, but to look what's out there and to make it specific to your agency. So some legal things to consider. Duty to warn. Second Life issues. Second Life is a virtual life there on the computer where many people live their majority of their life in Second Life as opposed to their first life. And so there are, if you have never heard of Second Life, everything's on there. There's college classes on there. The whole world is on there. You can fly, you can travel, you can be a person that you create, or your avatar could be an animal or anything like that. There are people that do provide therapy on Second Life, and they do accept Bitcoin, and they do have clients that way. And not that this is what we're talking about today, but just so you are aware, and again, the questions that you ask your client about their use of technology and what they're doing online, so that you know that this is happening out there. And we do have the duty to warn and have people understand what's going on. I know that there are some people that offer therapy this way, and I've often wondered, and I haven't had the opportunity to speak to them about it, but what do they do? If you have a tiger sitting in front of you in therapy and some type of an emergency situation happens, what do you do? How do you handle those emergencies? But making sure that people understand that. You also need to make sure that your liability insurance specifically covers telehealth. This is something that people often forget about or assume that their telehealth is covered by their malpractice insurance, and it may or it may not be. I had a person that I work with who was in private practice, and she called in and recognized that her insurance was not covering telehealth. She had to pay extra and make sure it's kind of an add-on. So you really need to make sure that that's there. You also need to make sure that your fee structure is clearly laid out, how you'll get paid. If you're not meeting with them face-to-face, how are they going to pay you? Are they going to mail it in? Do you have some other kind of paying? Is it a secure way that they're paying? Making sure that that's there. Also, if you get disconnected, if the screen freezes, if something like that happens, do you still pay? Do you still charge for the whole session? Do you charge for part of a session? Do you reschedule? And these are all things that you need to have clearly laid out ahead of time and have discussed with your client. And then, of course, making sure that you've done that pre-screening and that you've, to the best of your ability, identified this person as someone that would benefit from telehealth and would be safe in serving in that way. Truth in advertising, there's a lot of groups out there that advertise that they're providing telehealth, but they don't indicate who is providing the telehealth and what their competence is. Have they been trained? Do they attend ongoing trainings? Have they provided these services before? That needs to be noted. Certainly we have that in, I was again talking about rural areas where you run into people and the same people are out there. Dual relationship issues are still things that you need to consider and absolutely pay attention to with telehealth. And then your licensure. We encourage people to go onto your professional site, whatever that is, and your state licensure, and make sure that you understand their guiding, their ethical and any kind of policies they have in place for telehealth. They all mental health counselors, marriage and family therapists, social workers, psychologists, they all have within their ethical guidelines addressing telehealth. Some are longer, some are shorter. Marriage and family is pretty short and to the point, pretty succinct. It doesn't get real involved. Social work has an entire manual. Psychology is pretty involved as well. So make sure that you go out there and you do that research for yourself and make sure that you are operating ethically if you're going to provide telehealth. These are some other sites on state regulations. I like to look at what's happening across the country. And we have listed here Epstein, Becker, and Green, 50-state survey of telemental, telebehavioral health. They now have an app that you can download on your phone, and you can certainly keep up to date with what's going on state to state. It's very interesting because not all the states are on the same board. Not all the states are operating in the same manner or use the same terminology. Some people are required to be licensed, some are not, some credential. There's a lot of things going on. So certainly keeping up to date with those, and this is an easy way to do it, I encourage you all to do that as well. So, in speaking about ethics that we started talking about, I don't think this is so much the question anymore, but when we first started, it certainly was the question. Is telebehavioral health ethical, or is denying online services unethical? Is this really, because there are ethical situations that certainly arise in all the treatment that we do, and some extra things that arise with telehealth, and really analyzing that and taking a look at that. So there are organizations that have developed ethical codes. Again, I said your own licensing, state licensing, as well as your professional fields have those, and there's some other ones. This ethicscode.com has them as well, and we're going to go through. There's some more here. We're going to go through the ones from ethicscode.com, and this is the top 10 list from ethicscode.com. And a lot of these we've discussed. Number 10, understanding and informing. Online clinicians educate themselves about the uses and limits of online care, right? And you keep up with the research, you keep up with current practice. You either become involved with a group, you make sure that you have people that you're communicating with, you are involved in training, you have to keep up to date. Online practitioners inform potential clients of any relevant research, available data about online therapy, including potential effectiveness or limits. So that's certainly very important that we keep up with. Online and in-office service arrangements. We talked about this, assess the suitability of potential clients for online care. It may be insufficient for clients in crisis, life-threatening situations where in-person assessment and care is better alternative. If an online practitioner foresees that a potential client may require in-office care at some point, the practitioner informs the client and such. So you really need to have that discussed ahead of time and make sure clients understand. If they accept them into care, both parties agree that the therapist is within a reasonable geographic distance of the client and thus provide in-office care. Well, what I would say to this A is that if they're not in a reasonable distance from you, that you certainly have identified someone within reasonable distance of this client that you would refer to for face-to-face. Making absolutely incredibly important, like we said, making sure that you have the emergency contact for people with other means of communicating if an emergency situation was to happen. Okay, the limits of your license and insurance. Again, I told you, you need to make sure that your liability insurance is covering you, and certainly your agency. If you work for an agency and you're utilizing their insurance or you're operating under their insurance, you need to make sure that telehealth is covered. Currently, you cannot, I want to say this in a way because there are ways you can. Typically, I'll say for the most part, you can only practice with clients or persons served within your state. However, there's some exceptions. There are some states, and this is why it's important, like I said, with that Epstein, Green, and Becker, to keep up with other states, because there are some states that if you're licensed in Florida, and this is an example, and I don't know it to be true, but suppose Georgia may have something in place where they say, okay, you're licensed in Florida, you can apply for it's kind of like a license there, but it's not full license, but it's a license to practice behavioral telehealth for a certain amount of time. So there's some states that are doing that. There are some states that have interstate compacts, and this is really being pushed forward by psychology and nursing. They're way far ahead of the game there, and so it's a state compact, so it may be 3 or 4 states that come together and say that if you're licensed in any one of those states, you can practice telehealth across all of them. So it is very important, and this is changing. This has changed. When I first started in this field, there was you were only to be in your state, and that was it. There was really nothing else to go to do. Now, Florida at one point, and I'll be honest, I haven't looked this up lately. You guys can have this is going to look up. But that Florida had something in place that if people, because like I said, I had that contractor. I had that gentleman that was a contractor, and he would travel to other states, and he'd be there for a week, sometimes a week and a half, 2 weeks at a time. So instead of having a break of our services, Florida had in place that because his primary residence was here in Florida and because he lived here the majority of the time, if he was out of those states less than a month, I could still serve him under my license in other states. So there's things like that go on. So you really have to, that is why I'm telling you, you have to consistently go and research. Find these things out, ask the questions, because it is changing, and it can be continuous change. And that's why I think it's important to look at the other states, what's going on with them as well, and what the trends seem to be. Making sure that you educate yourself and advise clients of potential risks to confidentiality. You do the absolute best that you can to protect people's confidentiality. You make sure that you have a HIPAA-compliant video conferencing platform. You make sure you have an EHR that is HIPAA-compliant and safe. You make sure nothing's being recorded. It's all encrypted. You make sure all of these things. Understanding that there could be risks, right? There could be risks of people coming into your office as well. There could be risk of lots of things. So those are things that we just need to discuss and make sure that everybody knows the information. Certainly, we've talked about that, secure websites, using the current protective procedure, and that's the key. What is currently best standard is what you need to pay attention to. Reimbursement, we talked about that, making sure that you understand how you're being reimbursed. It used to be an issue of parity that insurance companies were originally paying less for telehealth, and thanks to all the physicians and doctors out there that was really pushing telemedicine and having a real problem with getting paid different rates for online services, at this point, things are being paid with parity. Online clinicians provide links and information of websites and those bodies that license, certify, and supervise the practitioner and to whom. So if something wants to happen, if a client wants to file a grievance, if there's something that happens between you and them, they need to know who to contact. Just as if you're, then this is why it's different than face-to-face, because face-to-face, that stuff is posted all in your lobbies. It's available in any client area. When you're working online, there isn't a client area, right? You're online. So you should have the links available for people and have that discussion with them about who they would contact and how they would contact in case of a grievance. Certainly professional standards and making sure that, because you're in a virtual office, making sure you're having the same standards that you would in a face-to-face. And the number one, online clinicians seek technical consultation or other means of understanding technical issues prior to providing online services. And I'm assuming that is why all of you guys are here today. This is a part of doing that, keeping yourself updated, keeping yourself educated and able to inform those that you serve. So I always find this really interesting. George Stricker, former head of APA Ethics Committee, discussed psychotherapy in cyberspace in 1996. And that the year always stands out to me. I'm like, did we have technology in 1996? I don't know. But some of the things that they were discussing at that time, again, the therapeutic relationships and responsibilities, identified a client, case of emergency, in-office care, privacy, limits. So all those things were being discussed way back then, which is really fascinating because a lot of people are just getting involved in telehealth and just at the very beginning of this and feel that we're at, it's a new thing when it's really not. It's been around for quite some time. And certainly back in that time, it may have been utilized or discussed, through the phone as well. So I know that when my supervisor came to me and said, we are going to start serving individuals in this grant through telehealth, and that is how we will work with them, and that's how we're going to serve them. As I'm looking at her smiling and saying, okay, great, inside my head I'm saying, are you kidding me right now? How in the world do you develop rapport with someone over a video screen as opposed to somebody sitting in your office? I'm a huge believer of feeling people's energy, being able to see their body language fully, being present, truly present with someone when you're conducting therapy. Well, here's the thing. Through the computer screen, I have been changed into a believer. I had a client who was diagnosed with leukemia, and he didn't want to come into the office and really shouldn't have come into the office because obviously of his compromised immune system. So I never met this gentleman face-to-face. This gentleman did end up passing while I was working with him, and we worked on extremely intense and deep issues, end-of-life issues. He had 2 small children and a wife. He had his father who passed a year earlier from the same leukemia. He had been estranged from his parents for many years because of emotional abuse. and he was now trying to reconnect with his mother at his end of life. So we worked through very, very intense, and on top of that, obviously, substance use issues. He had issues with alcohol, and then he began abusing, which is so common, the pain medications that he was prescribed. So working at that intensity and working with that gentleman, I absolutely believe that it was helpful for him and his family. I absolutely believe that he would have not have received those services if he had to go into an agency face-to-face. It wouldn't have happened, and I think it was absolutely valuable. It has completely changed. It's different. It's different in how you communicate and develop that rapport, but it is absolutely valuable and absolutely useful for people that aren't able to get into your site. So, without rapport, what do you have? How do you develop it face-to-face? That's always a question I ask people when I train this live. Well, what do you do face-to-face to develop rapport? What limits do you anticipate with the computer screen? And I know my limits were, again, can't feel this person's energy. I can't see their whole body. We're not even going to be looking eye to eye at each other. How am I supposed to build rapport? So, thinking about this, 60 to 65% of interpersonal communication is conveyed via nonverbal behaviors. Up to 60 to 90% was found in publications. So a lot of interpersonal communication is through nonverbal behaviors. If you're on the computer screen and you're looking at people from their torso up, you may not see their hands at all unless they're waving them in front of the camera. You certainly aren't seeing their legs. You don't see if they're shaking their foot rapidly or tapping their foot or tapping their hand or wringing their hands. Unless you see them moving slightly on the screen, you say, hey, I see you moving slightly. What's going on? Those are the kind of things that you have to do differently online than you do face-to-face. If someone's wringing their hands, tapping their foot, crossing their arms, crossing their legs, holding themselves close, you can see all that face-to-face. You may not be able to see all that online, so you have to ask people, tell me what your feet are doing right now. What's going on with your hands? You have to ask those kind of things where you wouldn't face-to-face. And again, it's that extra layer, that step, that extra verbalization that sometimes people struggle with. Certainly when people first start, they tend to be kind of nervous, and they forget to ask those kind of things. But certainly it's practice, practice, practice. So some things that are different about the computer in developing rapport. It's real common to, when you're sitting with somebody face-to-face, nodding your head, leaning forward, the forward technique, leaning, the face-to-face body mirroring, kind of, adjusting your body to the same way they are, even guiding them to relax, does it feel comfortable to uncross your legs solidly on the floor? Those kind of grounding. When you're sitting with someone, you can model that in front of them and they can see it. When you're on the camera, unless you take your camera off and you're putting your camera toward your feet, showing your body, which I suppose you could, it gets a little distracting. It also kind of makes you a little dizzy if you haven't seen that with the camera moving around. So you really, again, have to use more of that verbalization. The leaning forward, which you may do in a face-to-face session, it looks very odd sometimes on the computer unless you're really seated back. If you lean forward, your face becomes very big on the computer. It may not read the same way that it does face-to-face. Nodding may not read the same way as face-to-face. So these are all things that you have to practice and look at. Silence. Therapeutic silence is very normal, very expected when you're providing face-to-face services. But I'll tell you what, when you try to have that silence, utilizing video conferencing, oftentimes people will say, hey, wait, can you hear me? Did my sound go out? Are you still there? That's what happens time and time again. Again, we've talked about using that descriptive language. Using I would say is okay, using those kind of words, but sometimes it's difficult to hear when you say you really have to say it quite loud if you're going to do it. When you're face-to-face with someone, it's a little different. But certainly meeting the client where they are, utilizing those greater verbalizations, coming up with creative ways to do the same thing. Any of those kind of grounding exercises, maybe you stand up and you stand in your camera where they can see you about planting your feet solidly, whatever it is, but coming up with creative ways that you can show these things, you can demonstrate these things, you can still develop that rapport, but it is a little different on the camera. So again, choosing your words very carefully, listening for clients' reactions to your words. Sometimes it's easier to tell when people are confused or not quite getting it with their body language when they're in front of you. You may need to have questions like, did that make sense to you? Do you understand what I'm saying? Was that confusing in any way? You may have to do more of that, again, more of that verbalization because they are not right in front of you and you can't read their language. So we, at our site, again, using technology to help people, we have the ability, we have the technology where we send out the text, email, audio recording of appointment reminders. A lot of dentist offices have these, doctor's offices. It's pretty common these days. We do need to make sure we have releases for our clients. We have all three of those modes listed on our release, and then we ask that client to identify which one, if they do not want one of those, if they don't want to receive a text, if they don't want to receive a video, I keep saying video, I'm so used to that, an audio message, they may not want that. So again, you have to make sure you discuss that with them because, that could potentially, if they get a text on their phone and their phone's sitting on the table and it says you have an appointment, and I think ours actually does say Operation PAR, which you have to pay attention to as well, because you may be giving away people's information if their phone is on the desk and they're sitting there with some friends. So having that discussion with them and making sure that they understand, again, that's the risk, making sure that they clearly understand their risk and what they want to do, allowing them the opportunity to change their mind at any time or ask questions as well. So marketing behavioral health and talking to various individuals about behavioral health, telehealth. This has been something that has been a challenge. Like I already alluded to, it's been a challenge with some of the judges out there in some judiciary where we had one judge that told us they absolutely do not believe in telehealth, and they will absolutely not approve or recognize any telehealth sessions for any person in their court because what he said was he felt like that you can't tell if someone's using, you're really not connecting with them. Almost to the point he said you're really not providing therapy. So it's an ongoing discussion and education. We have other judges that we work with that are very open to it. So much so, I had a teenager, an adolescent, that I was seeing through telehealth because she was at our adolescent residential facility. She lived quite a ways away, but wanted to continue services with our agency. So we spoke with, she was a Marchman client, so we had to speak to Marchman Court about her, and it was in the county in which she lived. So we had to talk about that with them. They were very open to it, so much so because it became a concern, and this is what happened. So we're treating her, providing therapy video conferencing, that's fine. Unless you have a contract or with one of the labs to do drug screens, it's an issue. So she was in a different county, and we were worried about how we were going to do the drug screens that were required. So what we came up with was she was going to come in, I think it was once a month, and do a live screen at a facility that the Marchman Court identified. Outside of that, because we were doing random weekly drug screens, we were going to provide drug screens through the computer. And how we did that is we spent a lot of time speaking with our doctor at the time. We had our own lab and with various entities about this. And so we came up with a packet where we had double sealed with, it was an oral swab we were going to send with the bag with all the stuff in it, and we had it double sealed. We mailed it to them. So in order to make it random, we mailed one to them, or two, I think, at the beginning. And then we randomly would, that day, she had to call in. We do color code. So every day they had to call in, and when it was her color code, she would call me and say, okay, it's my color. And I said, all right, at 2 o'clock we'll log on, or whatever it was. So we'd log on site. She would open the package, the double sealed. Everything was in view of the camera. It was very important that everything, being viewed at the camera, that I could see her hands at the whole time, that I could watch her pull the items out and name them out of the packet. So we did all this, and what would happen is we would do the drug screen. She would send it back in the envelope that we had provided, and we went from there, and it worked out very nicely at the beginning. It was one of those situations where, again, assessing client, the client was fine. She was able to follow everything fine. What became an issue is that, and these are things to consider when you're working with adolescents, her mother, who had agreed to be in a different area when she was having her therapy sessions, wasn't able to follow that. I would see my client would use the safe word, and I'd say, okay, you need to get a cup of coffee, fine. And then I'd be quiet for a minute, and then she'd be like, all right, I think it's good now. Her mother continued to stand outside the door, come in the doorway, start telling her what to tell me. This went on several occasions. And after the third time, because I actually, ended up calling the mom and saying, hey, this seems to be happening. This doesn't seem to be the best way to serve. And we had a discussion, and we ended up not continuing with telehealth because of that situation. So when you're working with adolescents or persons, again, it's very important from the beginning, like I said, to have that conversation of you may change to face-to-face. We actually had to find another provider, like I said, in a totally different county, quite a bit of ways from here. So we had to find a provider, an appropriate provider that could provide face-to-face services over there that they would be able to get to. But it's one of those things that the client was fine, and I really felt bad because I think the client enjoyed having therapy that way and was doing well until the mother just could not. And we even agreed that we would have family sessions. There would be times that the mom would be present and so on, but just didn't work out. So I think the biggest way of convincing people and showing people how to market telehealth is really to show them what video conferencing looks like, to show them what is capable there, to show them that you can share your screen, to show them that you can have interactive sessions. You can creatively use things. Some of the video conferencing platforms have whiteboards or the ability to annotate or draw. So if you bring up a form, they can actually draw on it. They can check off things. You can have this interaction that's a little bit different than face-to-face, but still a back-and-forth active interaction that I think a lot of people don't realize that can happen. So certainly looking at primary health, and I know in our area, primary health is absolutely looking at telemedicine. Even our county is looking at providing health care in that way with the telemedicine moving forward in that way. Mental health providers, child protective agencies. We have had to do a lot of education with our child welfare organizations here and make sure that everybody is on the same page and understands, because certainly some of the providers were absolutely on board and felt it was fine. Others were absolutely against it. And the worst thing in the world is you really want to make sure that you're and okay with providing services this way, because you want as a client to have been receiving services in a way that you didn't check out with child welfare or didn't check out with whoever has referred them, and then they go to court for their case and they're told that they've done nothing. They've not met any kind of their case plan requirements because they weren't participating in a way that was approved. So that's a really important thing to make sure you're out there educating and providing those services. Again, residential providers, but we were talking about social. Internally, we were very lucky at our agency that our executive, managed staff, our leadership was very much on board. In fact, we're the ones who came pushing it towards us that we were going to do telehealth. So that was easy for us. The clinical staff, like myself, while compliant on the outside, weren't so compliant on the inside. And I just think it took a lot of training and ongoing training. I want to remind everybody, it's not just train everybody once and then move on. You really have to do a lot of discussion. You have to have those cheerleaders out there. You have to have those change agents out there continuously talking about and looking how you can use telehealth to better serve the people that you work with. I would also encourage to always have IT staff and get their feedback, have them in meetings, have them in discussions, because they can be extremely helpful in looking at things a little differently with the technology than just the clinical people. But having both of those on board is very important, and certainly getting client feedback is always valuable. So we have a time for a little poll. We recommend a lot of apps for our clients to use, and I'm going to go through that quickly. But we wanted to see what kind of apps do you use. So you see the poll question there. What apps do you currently use to augment treatment? Anxiety, depression, trauma, PTSD, wellness, you see the list. We're going to give you 5 minutes to fill that out. I'm going to keep going as you guys go ahead and fill in what kind of apps you use. So we started recommending apps certainly to our residential clients that the majority are pregnant and or recently gave birth. So we looked at a lot of pregnancy apps. We created a little committee, again, with an IT representative, a clinical representative, a leadership representative. And what we did was we came up with looking at all these apps that people brought forward or people said that they thought were helpful or they wanted to use, and looking at things like, does it cost money? What kind of information does it take from you or does it store about you? How easy is it to use? Was it helpful? We looked at these kind of things, and then we put together a little apps manual that we give to all of our clients that are using telehealth, and certainly all of our clients in residential. And I wanted to tell you about a few of them. Let me go to the next slide here. So there's a few 12-step meetings. We recommend there, you see it listed there, in the rooms. It's an app that has many 12-step meetings on there. Video conferencing meetings are available on there. And we've used this. Sometimes people are really terrified to go to a face-to-face meeting with a 12-step meeting alone. And sometimes they don't have anyone to go with. So we've recommended to a lot of people, go to In the Rooms. You can do it from the privacy of your own home. And there's meetings scheduled at all hours of the day. There's all sorts of meetings on In the Rooms. It's not merely 12-step meetings. There's all sorts of recovery-oriented meetings. Go on there, and then you can choose to participate. You don't have to participate. You can see, and we went on them, and I could absolutely see the connection of people. You could tell that there were people that consistently attend these meetings together. There was people that were truck drivers that were in, different states. There was people, so again, people traveling, people that jobs take them to other places, people that don't have the ability to go to face-to-face meetings, all very important, and all I think it's really helpful, and it seems to be a safer place. We had people go look, and sometimes for some of the 12-step meetings, you really need to make sure that it's run by the national organization. There's a lot of chat groups out there, and sometimes people find on the chat group, sometimes there's not really a person running the chat. It's just various chat going on, and people can get very bad advice or even dangerous advice. So I suggest that if you're recommending any apps for people to use, and you should, it's a way to augment treatment. It's a way to provide people some other things. Make sure that some of them cost money. We do a lot of wellness and meditation apps for people that we recommend. And in the beginning, some of those apps are completely free. Now you get to a certain limit or you get to a certain place with them, and then they start costing money. So you really do have to pay attention to that and make sure that people understand. So how to get started. So there's a lot of cost, obviously. We were lucky. Our leadership was all on board with it, so they figured out the cost and all that stuff. But, these are things that you do have to look into. Are you going to need more computers and devices, cameras, the cost of perhaps having, bandwidth? What's the bandwidth like do you have Wi-Fi availability at your agency? We certainly had to increase our Wi-Fi for our residential clients, both our adults and our adolescents, so that's a cost involved in there. We also, like I said, we loan, and then they have the option to buy these tablets. We had to look at breakage and theft, the cost of that, how we were going to keep that as a sustainable thing, how to choose that, and making sure everything is HIPAA compliant. You have BA agreements. Those cost money. If you're looking at a HIPAA compliant platform, you will be spending money. Certainly looking at workforce issues, making sure the counselors are qualified and trained, making sure that they're able to utilize the technology effectively, right? Looking at confidentiality, social responsibility, all these things. And the end of it all, safety and security. We here at our agency, we have what we call behavioral health, Telehealth 101, it's a 2-day course that we have everybody go through initially when they're going to provide telehealth services. Okay, so we didn't get any, did we get responses to our, we didn't, huh? Does no one recommend that?
We did. I'm closing the poll
what
now.
about responses? Awesome, okay, no answer. So that happens often that, you know, maybe people didn't answer because they felt like they don't provide anything. I see anxiety, depression, a little trauma, a little wellness, and I don't use apps the most. So I definitely think this is one thing to think about and potentially talk to your clients about to augment your treatment. Again, real quick, there's a paradigm shift. When we're looking at moving to telehealth, that is a shift. It used to be, back in the day, as my supervisor always said, you know, when we brought people into treatment, we looked at protecting them at all costs, certainly in residential. They need time away from the world to heal, no distractions from working on themselves, totally committed to their recovery, and no contact with bad influences. We're now kind of shifting with the availability of technology and how to work with people to we can't keep clients in a bubble. Safe failures, help them in teachable moments, help them learn how to safely use technology, and you know, bringing the positive out of the negative. Certainly working with people, because tell you what, when you kept people in that bubble in residential prior, when they got out, they certainly accessed technology. So it's one thing to really keep in mind that you're not saving people from that stuff if you don't provide them the opportunity to learn how to use safely. So again, we've kind of talked about these things with revenue concerns, making sure that you just talk to everybody. The thing with cash, how are you going to collect that? How are you collecting cash if you're working through telehealth? And you also have to have in your cost and considering cost is technology updates and devices. You know, they come out with better and better cameras all the time. They're not that expensive, but if you're covering an agency of 20, 30, whatever number of counselors that need updated cameras, to look into that. If people need multiple screens, one operate off of multiple screens, or sometimes it's helpful to have a bigger screen when you are providing telehealth services. All right, I know that there was a bunch of questions that I saw up here. So let's go back. Let me go back to some of these questions. All right. The first one, what is fidelity monitoring? So when I was referring to fidelity monitoring, what I was referring to was we utilize, especially for groups, but sometimes for individuals when we're working with beginning counselors, curricula, manualized curriculum. And you do need to have some fidelity monitoring with that to make sure that they're following the curriculum to how it's supposed to be run. So we have used the video conferencing, again, like I said, making sure you have the right releases in place and the clients have been explained everything, what the recording uses Zoom recordings for fidelity monitoring with some of our curricula. Can it be used for incarcerated parents, juveniles, or does legislative regulations prevent it from being used in these settings? You know, I have to be honest with you, I don't know. It would certainly be nice. I don't think currently, I was just involved in another, with another organization talking about this very issue, and I do not believe we located somebody that's using that currently. Like I said, we used to have the system where we had the ability to do video conferencing in the prisons with the fathers that were being released, but I'm not aware of any currently going on. Maybe somebody else is. Well, let's see. What EHR do you use? We use NetSmart My Avatar. And another thing, when you're looking at EHRs, one of the current trends with EHRs is to have video conferencing embedded within the EHR. And why is that important? Why does it matter? Right now, like I was telling you, we have one system that we have to log into if we want to set up the text, email, voice message for appointment reminders. You have to go in one system for that. You have to go in one system for EHR. You have to go into another system for video conferencing. So what they're trying to do is have it where people, it's like a one-stop shop. You go in this EHR and it's all there. And I know that NetSmart is working with, the name escapes me right now, but they are working with a video conferencing platform to try to have that, and they already do have it embedded within their system. And other EHRs are doing that as well, so I encourage you to ask those questions. And again, look, that video conferencing that's embedded in the EHR may not be one that you like. So you really need to, or may not suit your needs. So you need to look into that further as well. If your client is traveling out of state and as the clinician, you are not licensed in that state, can you still offer service? So I went over that a little bit. I think that what I would say, though, is you continually need to research that. And that needs to be continued to be researched. Ask questions because it's changing, especially with telemedicine and telepsychology. And the nursing and psychologists are really pushing for those interstate compacts to have multiple states come together that you're able to practice throughout those states. And there's some interesting things going on. Like I said, various states allowing people who are licensed in another state to practice telehealth for a certain time period. So you just have to really stay educated, go on some of those sites, talk to other professionals, and make sure you know prior to providing the services, for sure. If my patient travels out of state, do I have to have a national license? So again, I would look up. I told you that at one point, and I haven't looked it up lately, but at one point, Florida, if you were licensed in the state of Florida, you were allowed to practice telehealth if your client was traveling. And as long as they were not traveling for longer than a month's period of time, you could provide services to them. Do not take my word that that is current. That was going on when I was working with my client with a contractor. I would encourage you to look that up to still see if that, because it may have changed. That may not be the case now, but that certainly was the case at one time, which was really helpful because there's a lot of jobs that require people to travel, and it would be a shame for them to be missing a lot of sessions because they're having to work. So absolutely. Let's see. If a client asks to have a friend/relative join telehealth session, how do you execute a release of information if you don't already have one? So this is one of those situations that I think the clinician, and this is why some people get very nervous with telehealth sessions, because this kind of thing can happen, right? That you could, like I gave you that example, that little role play that you log on, your client's there, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, my boyfriend's here today, and I'd like them to participate in my session. And you have not talked to your client about this before. You may have some concerns. I think it's best to be planful and to make sure that you have the discussion with the client, the ins and outs. I wouldn't be so keen on doing that immediacy, like, all right, sure, they're there, let's join. I wouldn't do that. I don't think that that would be helpful. You don't have a release. Situations, emergency situations, dangerous situations could arise from that. I would tell the client, look, why don't we reschedule so we can talk further. I'll talk to you about this now, but we need to have some releases signed. We need to have some discussion about this prior to us having a session with somebody else there. Let's do this in a planful manner and work it that way. Okay with that, and hopefully they would understand, certainly explaining to them safety and all those things. I just wouldn't feel comfortable. I'd be too concerned that something, there's the potential for something to go very wrong if you don't do that. How do you protect your clients from hacking? Well, again, I think you do the absolute best that you can do with the current protection that's out there. And again, then you explain to your clients that there is risk. There is risk involved in charging gas at the gas station. There's risk involved. There's inherent risk. But what you do is you explain how your agency or you as a provider have put A, B, and C in place to protect them. And it's really ultimately their decision. They may say, well, no, I still don't feel safe with that. I'm not going to participate in telehealth, and that's okay. That's fine. I think you just need to make sure that you do the absolute best. And you have to keep updated. Like I said, again, with all of this, the key of it is staying updated because it's ever-changing. They come out with new protection, with new this, and you need to have that. And really being in the loop, getting involved in some discussion groups, being involved in looking at professional articles, talking to other people and other organizations that are providing telehealth. Extremely important to stay updated and have all that information to educate and update your clients ongoing. Let's see. Blah, blah, blah. What problems are identified by various bias, race, gender, et cetera? Well, I think it's I think it's very similar to face-to-face. I think access, availability, the opportunity, can vary. And I think some of that is out there. I feel that in our county. And we try to advocate and really look at that. I know we started off our whole focus on pregnant women with the telehealth, and then have found that as we started in that realm, how much more we could add to programming and to things like that. I think in general, there can be a lot of bias with treatment as a whole, not just telehealth. So I think trying to make that more equitable, trying to recognize that, trying to get out there, and that was one of the reasons that we provided the tablets from the get-go. And we will do that. We have some outpatient services that we have provided tablets for people as well, because they needed to participate telehealth because they weren't going to be able to get to us, but they didn't have the means to have a computer or a smartphone. So certainly looking at those things, I think it's very important, and always having those discussions as part of those groups. When I talked about developing those groups, that would be the ongoing discussion for telehealth, and making sure that you're focused on those issues, various biases, race, gender, all of that you really need to pay attention to how that works. Yeah. All right, what is a BAA? So a BAA is a business associates agreement that basically lays out and identifies, it's signed by you and it's signed by the video conferencing organization, that basically outlines how they are withholding HIPAA compliance. Very important, you must have a BAA to show that HIPAA compliance. So it may be a two-part situation with the video conferencing, where you may need to pay for the pro or the HIPAA compliant platform, and then you need to say also, okay, we also need to sign BAA. Are you able to provide teleconsultation for the agency I work for? We have the ability, our agency has on many occasions provided consultation for others, so my contact information will be available. How long have you been doing this successfully, and how can we make inroads in Miami-Dade City Family Court? Yeah, we've been doing this successfully. The grant that we had, that initial grant that I was talking about with the pregnant women, was about 5 years ago, but prior to myself, I've been at my agency for 7 years, and prior to coming here, they were practicing telehealth about 10 years ago, like I was saying, with the prisons, and there was one other program they had. Oh, can't remember exactly what it was, but they have been doing it for a while. And I would say this, I walked into it, again, I walked in with a very bad mindset, like you're not going to, from a clinical standpoint. And then I also, on the other hand, I walked in saying, this is going to reduce no-show, this is going to be fantastic. It really reminds me of the in-home work that, a majority of us have, where you go to, and serve people in their homes. And I thought that would reduce no-show too, and it always amazed me that I would call an hour before and say, hey, I'll be at your house at 2. I show up at the house, and they're like, yes, we're waiting for you, we'll be here. And then you show up at their house, and they're not there. That kind of thing still happens with telehealth. I think it's about being creative, and I think it's a way that can provide services for people that they didn't have before. I think our residential program for the both men and women, because we allow technology, because we actually have groups on technology, because we teach them the safe ways to use technology and how they can remain in contact with people that they may have left treatment for in the past to be with. I think that's really helpful. I think that's something that is really important, because technology is out there. It is part of our world. It is not something you saw the people that are offline, 10%? People are online. They are using technology, and we need to be able to provide treatment and certainly teach them how to be in recovery with technology a part of their life. I think that's so important. So how do you make inroads with Miami-Dade City Family Court? I'll tell you what, it's been rough. We've had to schedule many presentations, many meetings. I think it's about developing relationships within the court. And I think those relationships are always helpful, showing that your face-to-face services are successful and that you've worked with that court in that way. And then demonstrating the system. I think it was very helpful for several of the judges that we worked with and child welfare that we demonstrated the system and showed them how it worked, showed them our safety protocols, showed them how we would interact with people. And I think that's how we made some of the inroads that we were able to make. And what does EHR mean? EHR is electronic health record. If you are not with an electronic health record and doing things all paper, there's different security concerns with that. But certainly using an EHR if you're going to use telehealth is very important because you could do it with paper too, I suppose, if you scanned it in and then were able to share. But I think, things like creating a treatment plan, we really need to have client input in that, client involvement. And if you have an EHR, you can share your screen through your video conferencing platform, and you can create that treatment plan with the client. I think that's an amazing thing. I think that is really helpful for people and for them to understand. I think for so long, everybody operated in creating a treatment plan, then handing it to a client, having them sign it. They had very little involvement. We all know that that's a client's treatment plan. They need to be involved. These plans need to be individualized and focused, and it's so helpful with technology. Face-to-face, it's not an issue. You just turn your screen around or you work with them next to you. But, the ability to share your screen and the ability to share from your EHR and have it filed right there is really, really important, and I feel very valuable. All right, are those all the questions that we had? All right, I think we're right close to the time.
Thank you, Sandnes. This is Diane, and thank you for doing the presentation. I think we hit all the presentations with the resources and so forth. So I am going to go ahead and take over, and we're going to conclude our presentation by concluding with today's webinar. So your browser will take you to the evaluation form on FADA's new website. If you want to receive CE credits or a statement of credit for this event, please complete the evaluation. You will be prompted to register or sign in to complete the evaluation. You can register as a visitor at no cost. I please request and ask that you use the same email you used to register for the webinar if you are signing in as a new visitor. For CEs to be reported to our CE broker for Florida licensed healthcare practitioners, you must provide an accurate Florida Department of Health license prefix and number the first time you register. After you register or sign in, you'll be directed onward to the evaluation. You may consider using the same email address when you register for webinars through our WebEx link and when you set up your profile in FADA's system. This helps connect your attendance and your profile. You will get a second opportunity to complete the evaluation through a follow-up email. The sender will be Messenger at WebEx. Evaluation will close at midnight on Thursday, June 6th. We do not email statements of credit. Instead, after we verify attendance and completion of the evaluation, a statement of credit will be generated as a journal entry within your profile. Thank you for participating in today's webinar. We'd also like to recognize and thank especially the Florida Department of Children and Families Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health for funding today's education. Have a great rest of your day, and please hold for the evaluation.